It's been almost 4 years since Michael Jackson died, but he continues to make headlines, some of them coming out of a Los Angeles courtroom right now, where his mother is suing for damages over his death from a powerful anesthetic in June 2009. But the headline of this story is that Michael Jackson is making more money after his death than he ever did when he was alive. Tonight, you'll hear about the most remarkable financial and image resurrection in pop culture history and get a rare look at what Michael Jackson left behind. The Michael Jackson brand is alive and well paid, that is, extremely well paid. Barcelona, Spain, the 297th performance of the Michael Jackson Immortal World Tour. Cirque du Soleil produces the show, featuring their acrobats and contortionists. But Michael Jackson, or at least his music, is the star.
We sold 230,000 tickets in 2 days in Japan. We did 90,000 people in Moscow, 190,000 people in Mexico City alone.
John Branca is an executor of Michael Jackson's estate, an architect, if you will, of how to make money off his legacy, most of which will eventually be turned over to Jackson's 3 children. Branca was Jackson's lawyer and advisor off and on for over 25 years and negotiated many of the singer's biggest deals during his lifetime.
It's just unbelievable. Michael Jackson sells more tickets dead than most artists do alive.
That is absolutely true. Worldwide box office now is over $300 million. And Michael has almost 60 million Facebook friends. He's the biggest selling artist on iTunes, and he's sold approximately 50 million albums since he passed away.
It feels like you can't talk about all those great things about Michael without talking about the fact that his image was so battered and tarnished by the time of his death. Have his fans just forgotten about all of that? About all the weirdness?
As managers of the estate, we don't really pay attention to the tabloids. We look at the Michael that we knew, the real Michael, the artistic genius, the visionary.
The real Michael Jackson also told Ed Bradley on 60 Minutes that he let young boys sleep in his bed. You can't run away from that, right? You can't hide from it.
Well, I don't recall that interview, and I just know the Michael Jackson that I knew was somebody I considered, a very honorable person.
John Branca chooses his words carefully. Another subject he doesn't like to discuss is Michael Jackson's family. Jackson's father and some of his siblings challenged Branca as executor and the validity of Jackson's will. But the California courts upheld the will and Branca's ability to carry out Michael Jackson's wishes.
There was a series of wills, and they were substantively almost identical.
In that 20% went to charity, 40% went to his children, and 40% went to his mother as long as she was alive, and on her death would go to the children. The basic principle never changed.
Never changed. The whole objective of Michael's estate plan is to take care of his mother during her lifetime and to accumulate the principal and the assets for the benefit of Michael's children.
The will named Branca and John McClane, a longtime friend of Michael Jackson, as co-executors. Jackson's crippled image was not the only thing they had to contend with. At first glance, Michael Jackson left more debt than anything.
The day he died, Michael Jackson had about $500 million in debt.
Zach O'Malley Greenberg is a senior editor for Forbes magazine, and he's been covering the estate since Jackson's death.
How much did his lifestyle and his personality have to do with his debt?
He never stopped spending like it was the 1980s. We charted it in Forbes. I mean, he was making 50, 60, 80, over $100 million some of those years, and even into the 90s. But after the first allegations in 1993, he never toured in the U.S. again. He never got another endorsement deal in his lifetime.
The first allegations of child abuse?
In 1993, correct. He became in many ways radioactive to brands and to sorts of companies that would contribute to those massive paydays in the 80s. And the upkeep on a place like Neverland, the spending on antiques and so forth, and the maintenance of his entourage and all of that, it really added up.
This is one of how many warehouses that you have?
5.
You can see how he spent his money and some of what made up his extravagant lifestyle in this California warehouse.
Wow, the Neverland. That's the actual sign from Neverland?
That is the actual sign from Neverland that was over the gates.
Karen Langford was friends with Michael Jackson and worked with him from 1981 until his death. She's now the archivist for the Jackson estate. There are rows and rows, floor to ceiling, of Jackson's possessions, most of it never seen publicly since he died. This warehouse is 20,000 square feet. Every inch of it is full. There are antiques and video games from Neverland Ranch. His Grammys.
Best R&B vocal performance, male, 1983, Billie Jean.
And 30 years of cars he never wanted to get rid of.
Are these all Michael's cars?
These are some of them.
Some of them?
Some of them.
More cars.
More cars.
There's another Rolls Royce.
Yeah, well, there's a few.
Did he drive any of these cars?
He did drive on occasion.
Late in his life, Michael Jackson financed much of his lifestyle by routinely borrowing against his assets. But it wasn't these personal belongings that he used as collateral. Although the copyright value of his own songs was worth well in excess of $100 million, the crown jewel of his investment strategy was his portfolio of other people's songs, especially those of the Beatles.
Tell me about the music catalog, the publishing catalog that you advised Michael to buy.
We started with the Sly and the Family Stone catalog. We bought some rock classics, People Get Ready by Curtis Mayfield, Dion the Belmonts' Runaround Sue, The Wanderer, When a Man Loves a Woman, Great Balls of Fire, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. But then one day I got the call that the Beatles catalog was for sale. It was called ATV Music. And it was as if we had hit the mother lode.
And you paid?
The price was $47.5 million. And we later merged it with Sony's music publishing company to create one of the biggest publishers in the world, Sony ATV Music, that the estate to this day owns 50% of.
And so how much is that worth today?
I wouldn't want to speculate about what it's worth, but...
Come on, John. you didn't make all this money in this town without knowing what your investments are worth.
Well, it would be speculation at this point.
It's estimated to be worth like $1 billion.
Michael's half?
Yes.
Well, you know, you never really know what something's worth until you go to sell it, and we are not sellers. We are not going to sell any assets.
At the time of his death, Michael Jackson had borrowed $380 million against the value of the songs he owned, so the estate had to move quickly to avoid losing the songs to creditors. John Branca sold future music rights to Sony for a reported $250 million. It was the biggest record deal in history. Branca's team also combed through personal video shot during rehearsals for a comeback tour Jackson was preparing for right before his death. The footage showed the talent Michael Jackson still possessed as a singer, dancer, and entertainer, then 50 years old. It was made into a movie called This Is It and was released within months of Michael Jackson's death. So far, it's made over $500 million.
A lot of companies got on board with Michael Jackson once they saw the success of This Is It, and once they saw, you know, Sony investing $250 million for that record deal. You know, then you see Pepsi coming back and doing an endorsement with him. You see Cirque du Soleil coming in and doing the show. You know, I think that those first couple deals proved that Michael Jackson was no longer radioactive.
So death erased all his sins, or even possible sins, or suggestion of sins?
I think his death caused people to remember him as he was in the Thriller years. You started to hear Billie Jean and Beat It and Thriller on the radio all the time. I think that transported people back to the mid-'80s when Michael Jackson was at the peak of his career.
That's what the Jackson estate and Cirque du Soleil gambled on. Michael Jackson's 1983 Thriller video helped the Thriller album become the largest selling ever. It had 7 hit songs on it. His music drives the touring Cirque du Soleil production. Jackson's estate and Cirque du Soleil are 50-50 partners.
Exactly what you're gonna see. So that you come to me to see your fantasies. My baby on a Saturday.
And while this show is expected to continue touring for years, a new production opens this week in Las Vegas. It's called Michael Jackson 1, and we were allowed in to watch one of the final rehearsals. This show features more of classic Michael Jackson choreography and more of Cirque du Soleil's signature acrobatic production, created by founder Guy Laliberté.
Do people come here to see Michael Jackson, or are they coming to see something else?
I think people are coming here, yes, because they're passionate about Michael. So it's very tricky because you're touching an iconic figure, and you have to be careful because the base fans there are very, very difficult and demanding.
Making money on Michael Jackson's legacy is one thing. Keeping it is another. John Branca needed a team of lawyers to navigate a litany of claims against the estate.
There were so many claims that were filed, and I can honestly tell you that most of them were ridiculous. Most of them were absurd. People making paternity claims and claims to have written all the songs that he ever wrote. And you know, when you have an estate and you're in front of a court, you have to take these things seriously.
Every single one?
Every single one.
Settling some, throwing some out?
Throwing many out, settling the ones that we thought were valid. There's a couple that are still pending.
Also still a work in progress is the sorting of Michael Jackson's effects.
Michael Jackson, personal clothing? Mm-hmm. This is what he wore. There's that famous jacket.
There it is.
Wow. That's amazing.
This is one of the safes that we have, and
Karen Langford showed us some of the more valuable items, which are kept in this safe, like this sequined glove he wore while on tour. It's estimated to be worth over $80,000 at auction.
Can I touch it?
sure,
Gently.
gently.
Wow, it's kind of heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Look at that. I mean, you can't look at that without... Look how it sparkles.
Yep.
All of his belongings will be preserved until Michael Jackson's children come of age,
This is his shoes.
when they can decide what's to be done with all of it. The more time passes, the more its value, and the more money his legacy generates. Executors Branca and McLean get 10% of what they make for the estate, but their results speak volumes. They've already erased the $500 million of debt Michael Jackson had at his death.
Since Michael Jackson died, the estate has taken in over $600 million.
But he died in 2009.
He died in 2009, and he made...
It's in 4 years, roughly 4 years.
Over $600 million, and that's more than any single living artist has made over that period of time.
And he's not around to spend any of the money.
Correct.
Hold for applause, slow umbrella fade out.
Go to 60minutesovertime.com to see one of Michael Jackson's most personal items, his handwritten manifesto. A Correspondent Candid with 60 Minutes, Lara Logan.
The interesting thing about this warehouse is that we're not allowed to say where it is.
Everything here is Michael Jackson's?
Everything that you'll see.
Michael Jackson left behind so many personal possessions that they have filled 5 warehouses.
What is this?
One of the props from the Leave Me Alone video.
Since his death, it's been organized by Karen Langford, the archivist.
Well, there was 8 Grammys that he won that year.
To my knowledge, 60 Minutes is the only news organization that's had this kind of extensive tour.
Give me a cutaway of this. Yeah.
Overall,
That's him as Peter Pan?
yes.
Okay, what do you have here, Karen?
And this is Michael's handwriting.
And how old was he when he wrote this?
He would have been 21.
21 years old.
He wrote a manifesto to himself, scribbled on the back of a tour itinerary in 1979 that described his mission statement for what he wanted to become.
The document reads, MJ will be my new name. No more Michael Jackson. I want a whole new character, a whole new look. I should be a totally different person.
He talks about that he will need to study and look back on the whole world of entertainment. He really thought about the fact that he needed to change how people perceived him from his days on Motown and as a member of the Jackson 5 and the Jackson Brothers.
One of the things that I discovered is that it was very hard to get a sense of who Michael Jackson was by the end of his life. Because under this siege of accusations and stardom, the real Michael Jackson kind of disappeared. I was hungry for a sense of who Michael Jackson was as a person, and what could be more personal than something he wrote like that when he was so young. I should be a new, incredible actor, singer, dancer that will shock the world. I will do no interviews. I will be magic. I will be a perfectionist, a researcher, a trainer, a master. I will be better than every great actor roped into one.
He didn't have small goals for himself.
No, he's an underachiever, clearly.
Very, very much so.
It's not unusual for young artists, musicians, actors to daydream about how big a star they want to become, but for someone to write it down at age 21 and actually execute it almost to the T is remarkable.
Wow.
He set his goals, and he did exactly what he said on the back of that piece of paper.
He sure liked to collect things, didn't he? Anything and everything.
Because the warehouse reminded me so much of the last scene of Citizen Kane, I had to ask Karen Langford, well, is there a rosebud here? And she looked at me sort of funny, and she's like, what are you talking about, rosebud? I said, well, you know, William Randolph Hearst was the model for Citizen Kane, and when he died, he left a treasure trove of artifacts and properties. The movie implied that the thing that mattered to him most was a sled that was called Rosebud. And so I asked Karen Langford, does Michael Jackson have a rosebud?
I wanted to show you something that I thought...
She brought us over to something that she thought represented him and what he cared about the most.
This is something that speaks to him, his love of kids, and this was a gift to him.
To MJ love E.T.?
Elizabeth Taylor.
Oh, wow.
They were so close, the two of them. Karen Langford, the archivist, said to us that he really did have a real friendship with Elizabeth Taylor.
Is the whole carousel here?
No.
Just this one?
Just this.
Clearly there was a big emphasis on children in Michael's life, and everyone who knew him talks a lot about the fact that Michael loved kids and that he was reliving the childhood that he never had.
This is a diorama that was at Neverland.
A diorama?
Yeah, that was built for him actually by Disney.
Now, you know, for people who didn't know Michael Jackson and don't really know what to make of the allegations of, inappropriate actions with children, it's kind of creepy a little bit. In a way, you're wondering, like, is anybody else feeling like this is sort of awkward?
This was in the movie theater.
Did you watch movies there?
Yeah, yeah.
I spoke to Karen a lot throughout the filming of this story, and I got the best sense of Michael as a person from her, because she really truly loved Michael.
She met Michael in 1981, got to be friends with him over the years, and worked with him off and on until his death.
But these are his socks.
Look at that. I mean, those are his original socks. Yep. So these are his shoes.
These are actually shoes that he wore.
And he wore those with the socks, and the jacket, and the hat.
Michael Jackson's performance on the Motown 25 special is widely considered to be one of the most important televised musical performances in history. It was the first time Michael Jackson performed the moonwalk on television. It looked like a trick. It looked like a special effect. This performance that the rest of the world was astonished at. Michael initially was very upset about it.
This is his memories of performing Billie Jean on Motown 25. I got an incredible response, more than I imagined, standing ovation, but still I was disappointed that after the big spin, I didn't stay on my toes long enough. I remember him telling me the story afterwards. He goes, I wasn't on my toes long enough. What do you mean you weren't on your toes long enough? How would anybody know that?
But he knew it.
He knew it.
This is one of how many warehouses that you have?
5.
You can see how he spent his money and some of what made up his extravagant lifestyle in this California warehouse.
Wow, the Neverland. That's the actual sign from Neverland?
That is the actual sign from Neverland that was over the gates.
Karen Langford was friends with Michael Jackson and worked with him from 1981 until his death. She's now the archivist for the Jackson estate. There are rows and rows, floor to ceiling, of Jackson's possessions, most of it never seen publicly since he died. This warehouse is 20,000 square feet. Every inch of it is full. There are antiques and video games from Neverland Ranch. His Grammys.
Best R&B vocal performance, male, 1983, Billie Jean.
And 30 years of cars he never wanted to get rid of.
Are these all Michael's cars?
These are some of them.
Some of them?
Some of them.
More cars.
More cars.
There's another Rolls Royce.
Yeah, well, there's a few.
Did he have his license?
He did. He did. Yes. It was enough for me to be in one of the golf carts at Neverland and have him drive me around.
He was not a good driver?
He just liked to have a good time, you know, and take in, oh, did you see over there? You know.
Late in his life, Michael Jackson financed much of his lifestyle by routinely borrowing against his assets. But it wasn't these personal belongings that he used as collateral.
So then...
So this is Michael Jackson, personal clothing?
Mm-hmm.
This is what he wore for Billie Jean?
Yep.
There's that famous jacket.
There it is.
Wow. That's amazing. Look at that.